Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is one of the best Castlevania games I've ever played. Okay, so maybe it isn't actually a Castlevania game, but it might as well be. This spiritual successor to the classic Castlevania series was developed by Inti Creates, who also worked on several of the Mega Man games. This side game is sort of a spin-off from Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which is more in the style of the later Castlevania games like Symphony of the Night. This original Curse of the Moon game was actually a stretch goal that was met during the crowdfunding campaign for Ritual of the Night on Kickstarter. But now that Curse of the Moon has its own sequel, it has morphed into its own entity in my eyes. But we aren't talking about some dumb Metroidvania, we're talking about cold, hard Castlevania, baby.
Also, I haven't even played Ritual of the Night yet, so I couldn't talk about it if I wanted to. Maybe some other time, as it does look pretty fun.
As it should be the 3rd anniversary of Curse of the Moon by the time I upload this video, I thought it fitting to talk about this amazing game. I do feel obligated to say though that there will be spoilers for basically the entire game as I plan to go through and give my thoughts on it. It isn't super story rich, so I'd highly recommend you play it either way. Without further ado, when you start a new file, you get a paragraph of scrolling text to set you up for your journey ahead. It tells about how you are Zangetsu, a demon-killing swordsman scarred with the curse of the moon and the desire to eradicate all demons. With that, you are sent off to do just that. No lengthy cutscene or pile of dialogue, just, hey, go kill some demons, and maybe the moon, and do just that. When the screen fades in, you see Zangetsu setting off towards your first challenge in a shot clearly reminiscent of the opening of the first Castlevania game. The entire beginning part of the stage is in fact a big callback to the start of Castlevania. You start on this pathway with a few health and weapon point pickups, leading into a hallway with simple enemies that run towards you. It's a nice sense of familiarity before you are flung into the rest of the game. This first stage is a rundown train station infested with demon kind for you to deal with. There are several spots that seem impossible to reach on your first time through, but we'll get back to that later. For now, let's just be concerned about this boss. He is the Glutton Train, a ghost train possessed by a demon with the sole purpose of bringing the doomed to the demon castle. The game doesn't actually tell you any of this. The only way to learn about it would be to go to the official Bloodstained Curse of the Moon website, where they have little descriptions of bosses and their abilities. It's honestly really cool and something you should check out if you are interested. Once you defeat him, a pink bubble emerges from the beast, and you are confronted with a new character, Miriam. She's a young woman who has been experimented on by alchemists, also known as a shardbinder. Because of this, Zangetsu is at first hostile and threatening towards her, as she innately can associate with demons. But she explains her righteousness and is accepted to team up with Zangetsu against the rising demon threat. There are 2 other characters who can join you on your journey, those being Alfred, an alchemist skilled in magic, or Gable, a shardbinder like Miriam but also a vampire. Both of them are similar to Miriam in the way that Zangetsu is initially against, but chooses to let them on the team because of their potential usefulness to his cause. I suppose now is a good time as ever to go into the moveset and gameplay differences between the cast. Zangetsu is your all-around damage dealer and decent pick for most situations. He's the most health out of the bunch, but the range of his katana, Zangetsu-to, can need a bit of getting used to. He has several sub-weapons like a magic charm that makes a vortex on the floor dealing lots of damage to stationary enemies, or an upward ball and chain attack for flying foes. These are both good, however my personal favorite has to be the Demon's Essence. For 10 seconds your main attack will do more damage, and it only costs 4 weapon points. Plus, after you cast it, you can switch to any other character and keep the effect. I make sure to keep it on me at all times, discounting 1 or 2 situations where another sub-weapon might be better. Miriam has the 2nd highest health, but the highest jump. This can sometimes be disorienting for tense jumps, but it isn't really an issue. She also has a slide move which can be used to get into smaller spaces, but it's really situational. It doesn't deal any damage, and it isn't any faster than walking. She uses a whip with great range for enemies that make space an issue, but it doesn't hit as fast nor as hard as Zangetsu-to. She also has a good variety of sub-weapons, consisting of a light throwing dagger, a set of 3 that you throw upwards, great for anti-air, a giant axe dealing heavy damage but with long startup time, and a boomerang-like sickle that can be positioned to hit enemies multiple times. I mostly used the sickle or axe for bosses, but found the triple daggers to be very useful in normal gameplay. Alfred has the worst jump, least health, weakest main attack, and shortest range. However, He makes up with this in leaps and bounds through his amazing sub-weapons, like a fire shield that blocks all projectiles, or an ice beam that freezes enemies, allowing you to one-shot them. He also has this weird one that makes a clone a short distance in front of you, but it's worthless. He also has this ultra-powerful lightning attack that homes in on enemies and ravages their health bars, but it's only available in like 3 spots in the whole game, so you can't rely on it too greatly. Gable has a decent jump, decent health bar, and a pretty unique main attack. He shoots at 3 bats from his cape doing minor damage each, but if you hit all 3, they do some good damage. They go diagonally upwards and have a bit of range so that they can be good at blocking projectiles. He does not have any sub-weapons, but instead can turn into a bat and fly around while draining weapon points. It's good for gliding over areas and getting into small places. He's a little situational, but the most useful thing about him is that he doesn't get any sub-weapons from purple lanterns, but instead gets 5 weapon points for the party to use. This allows you to use more sub-weapons more often. As you fight through hordes of demons, you get to explore a variety of locales, from ancient tombs to torture chambers, or even a mechanical library. And with each of these comes a jam of a song. 1 minute it's all, then it goes, and even, each feeling uniquely fitting for their situation and setting. Heck, I'm listening to it right now as I write this, and it still holds up. There's one area I'd like to highlight, that being stage 5. It is the final stage before you actually reach the demonic castle that is your destination, and it's one of my favorite points in the game. You start out in the hull of this submerged, rotting ship. I haven't gotten a clue how you could have gotten there in the first place, but I'm not going to ask questions. You can immediately grab the Demon Essence power-up for Zangetsu, and it's really good for dispatching these, well, I don't really know how to describe them, kind of like slug Venus flytrap things. I'll just search it up. They're called Semas. We can tear through these Semas in one hit with the power-up activated, as you run and avoid pits that you'd otherwise fall into. As the level goes on, you get to exit the ship to go onto its surface and climb its masts in the heavy rain and wind. This will be constantly pushing against you to go right, which can make it pretty annoying to go left, but when you run with the wind, you zoom past everything. Your momentum carries over to make large gaps, and it feels like you're running through an obstacle course, but then it lets you slow down as you re-enter the hole, and then keep going back and forth. The balance of quickness and deliberation perfectly contrast with each other to make an amazing stage, and if that wasn't enough, the boss is just as good. You meet Andrelephus at the very top of this half-sunken ship perched upon the crow's nest waiting for your arrival. Even if you hadn't read about him on the website to see he is a high-ranking demon sent by whoever is behind all of this in order to hinder you, you'd still know him to be important from his gleaming appearance and demeanor. He's the final obstacle on your map so far, and the toughest one yet. He'll go back and forth a couple of times, seemingly just to taunt you. It is very difficult to hit him at this time, but Gable can hit him with his bat, and Miriam can hit him at his lowest dip. After a bit of this, he'll rain down several lightning stakes, which you'll need to break before he does one of 2 possible attacks. He will either generate a big gust of wind to throw you off the ship, or come down with a mighty kick. You need to be ready for either, and there isn't much time to react. If you manage to avoid either of these attacks, he will stand still for a moment, allowing you to gain several hits. Once you hit him enough, he breaks the mast of the ship and makes a brilliantly gleaming light. It sparks and shines as he comes down quickly with a kick attack before going to the center of the screen, erupting into a huge column of light. You need to carefully position yourself between this huge pillar and the lightning on either side of the masts as he burns up in his own brilliance. After a few moments, he fizzles out and you are left with clear skies as you see the demonic castle off in the distance. You have made a great achievement just now, and the game makes sure to show you that by allowing you to clearly see your final obstacle in the distance. Now you can move on to the castle, this dreaded castle you've worked so hard to reach. You start at the base of its formation, a dank dungeon full of torture devices, iron maidens, scissor-wielding maniacs, and saw blades. You can practically smell the rotting wood and rust and blood emanating from such a delineation. Most of this first stage is spent beneath the rest of the castle, as you ascend through the dungeon until you finally reach the utmost area. It's a breath of sickly fresh air as you reach this ornate hallway. And wait, hold on. This is just the hallway from the original Castlevania. Yeah, you know the one. Only one of the most notoriously hard and annoying moments in NES gaming. I had a nice little chuckle when I first saw this, but it's much easier than the room it's based on due to the less clunky controls and added mobility over the classic. At the end of this hallway, just like in Castlevania, you will find the stage boss. This can either be quick and fun or infinitely annoying if you get cocky or just unlucky. Bloodless is in charge of the torture chamber and uses blood gathered from said torture to attain eternal youth and beauty. She flies around at the top of the screen, and to reach her you have to stop 3 moving umbrellas and use them as platforms. She can summon projectiles that swivel downwards, an attack that covers the floor in spikes, and make blood rain from the ceiling as you have to move on, off, and under the floating umbrellas to stay safe. As long as you don't try to get too many extra hits while dodging her attacks, and you stay aware of when she will rain down blood, you should be fine. I'd highly recommend Zangetsu's magic charm to trap her atop the top umbrella, and stabbing her a few times before the charm stops going. It will rack up a lot of damage, and it is relatively safe as she cannot get in any attacks or touch you during this time. Just before she dies, she releases an all-out attack as a last-ditch effort to kill you, where she erupts into a cyclone of blood and charges at you. Well, glad that's over with. Now we can finally enter the castle proper. Stage 7 takes place in a monumental mechanical library tower high up in the infernal fortress. Huge gears and platforms move orderly along the walls of this huge library as books shift in and out of position to be used as platforms. It's clearly a magical place, reflecting the fact that you are nearly at the heart of this whole operation. It's very platform heavy, with tight timed jumps with these annoying fairies that can give you some trouble. It's quite memorable from a design standpoint, but there isn't too much to actually say about it. The boss is stationed at the very peak of his tower in his personal library. Bathan looks very similar to Andrelephus, so you can infer that he is a very high status in the rank of demons. He's a very fun boss as he flips and zips around the arena at lightning speed. There are plenty of maneuvers you can do to get in extra hits, like by ducking as he flips over you to the side and hitting him a few times. It's really fast-paced and something that wouldn't have been possible on the NES. I'm glad the developers only took inspiration from the style and gameplay of the classic, instead of limiting themselves to what would have been doable in 1986. Once he is defeated, you can begin your penultimate challenge before the final boss, Level 8. It starts off immediately strong with you stationed in a regal hallway full of chandeliers and angelic statues, but that all begins to crumble as the dark swarm comes through, destroying the ceiling and platforms all around you. You move on to hurry down a staircase and get away from the swarm, but it keeps hot on you. It's clear how desperate the demons have become if they are destroying their own fortress just to stop you. The music is loomingly epic to fit the occasion of this invasion into the enemy's territory. You run through the beautifully gothic halls of this cathedral-like structure as only the strongest demons you face stand in the offense. The dark swarm continues to harass you the entire time you traverse the domain, coming to chase you up vertical climbs and tight hallways. One thing evident throughout the game and in this level that I only recognized on my second playthrough was that the moon changes phases through each level you complete. Many points have it framed through rubble or glass to emphasize it all, leading up to the final stage where it is fully illuminated. Maybe the intro wasn't lying when it said you may strike down the moon itself. You finally reach the chamber of the dreadful demon lord Gremory. You walk up crystalline stairs and enter your final arena. Gremory emerges from stained glass, no battle cry or taunt, just a smirk on her face and a will to kill you where you stand. She summons the dark swarm to attack in different patterns telegraphed by her hand motions. For example, when she motions with one hand to the top right, that means you should stay on the left side as the dark swarm will cover most of the right side of the screen. While the swarm attacks, she will summon a circle of magic projectiles that will shoot out of her after a few seconds, so it's good to hit as many of those as you can. Once her first phase is through, she is more mad than anything as she pushes you up towards the very top of the castle's peak. There she harnesses the power of the moon and unleashes her true form. She attacks with crescent moon projectiles with varying patterns, as well as launching huge spears into the ground that you can use as platforms to hit her for a short while before she destroys them again. She can even take the whole force of the moon down upon you, leaving little room to maneuver. It's really intense as you wait for her to set up platforms for you to attack her on, and for restocks of weapon points to use Alfred's lightning spell. Eventually, you will flay this lord by the skin of your teeth and be greeted with the fate of your story. As the castle crumbles with its creator weak, Gremory's soul attempts to absorb itself into your party and take control back over her castle. But wait. Before she can do so, Zangetsu sacrifices himself to save his newfound friends and hope for their escape. Zangetsu's friends escape, but Zangetsu is absorbed by the dark power of Gremory and is the new Emperor of Darkness. Alfred, Miriam, and Gable, wishing to free Zangetsu, set back off into the darkness to save their friend. This is the standard ending most people will get and opens up a new mode in which you can go back through the game from start to finish without Zangetsu. It's a bit annoying that there aren't many new features added to this campaign, but the stages are fun enough to salvage it. Plus, remember how I mentioned that there were places you weren't able to reach at first? Well, now you can use the added mobility and abilities from your trio to reach them and explore alternate paths. It's quite neat seeing these hidden places you weren't able to access before opened up for exploration. Once you finally reach stage 8, you aren't greeted with the dark swarm like last time, but an empty, solemn hallway, leading into a chamber locked with 3 charms. To break these charms, each member of the party must face a special challenge laid out for them. You get to play as each character individually to go through special challenges and fight mini-bosses. You can see the mountains are red and Chinese-style architecture litter the new areas Zangetsu has made. It shows how Zangetsu has really morphed with the dark power. The enemies and mini-bosses are also unique to match the style change, however are just reskinned enemies from old stages. This includes the mini-bosses, which are reskinned versions of the tougher demons blocking your way throughout the game. Once each seal is broken, you descend into Zangetsu's chamber. The sun's blackened out and has a green hue around it, likely from Zangetsu's influence. You can actually see in this new campaign that the moon starts out full in the first stage and gradually becomes more empty as time goes on before you see it in its eclipsed state. This makes me think that Zangetsu has been draining it of all its power for himself while Gremory was charging it up for her own purposes. It's a small detail that I doubt I would have even noticed if I hadn't replayed the game.
Die, monster! You don't belong in this world!
What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets! But enough talk! How about you?
He quickly disables Alfred and Gable, leaving only Miriam to fight him. All of his attacks hit heavy and fast. You need to be aware at all times and ready to position yourself in a way that you can land as many hits as you can. At certain points, one of your allies will revive themselves to protect you from an incoming attack before being stunned by Zangetsu once again. Alfred uses a fire shield to protect you from projectiles shot by Zangetsu, while Gable makes a platform of bats for you to stand on while the floor is filled with spike. This culmination of mechanics and collaboration of your team is wonderfully presented and adds a sense of cooperation and intensity to a wonderful fight. As Zangetsu prepares for a powerful attack to finish the trio off, the whole team revives and prepares to defeat him. Alfred charges up a powerful spell as Zangetsu tries to break his concentration, so Miriam and Gable have to fight off projectiles shot towards Alfred. The final moment takes all they love from the game and cranks it up to 11 as the team prepares to take down their greatest adversary and free their best companion. With a final burst of electricity, Zangetsu is defeated and the trio watch as light returns to the world. You can see a pink orb floating off out of the castle, not dissimilar from the ones that emerged when you freed your other allies, showing that Zangetsu was indeed freed from the demonic influence. However, it is bittersweet. The trio was unable to save Zangetsu's life, and only were able to free his soul. This is essentially the true ending as far as the game is concerned, but I am not quite satisfied with that answer. Later in a post-credit scene, we can see Zangetsu waking up atop a tower in a glowing cyberpunk city, which is said to be the afterlife for him. This is actually a reference to Indie Create's other franchise, Azure Striker Gunvolt, in which this is the universe. This made me a little upset considering how much I liked the ending before they had to make it half a joke. And even if this wasn't in the game, Zangetsu and all his allies reappear in the second game acting as old pals, so he couldn't have died. I had to interpret the actual ending to have been one where Zangetsu was freed by his friends and survived, as I can set up their relationship in the next game, but I don't want to get too much into that until I make a video on Curse of the Moon 2 eventually. You know, there is actually another ending you can get. No one said you had to recruit any of those allies of yours. You could always just...
I'm a PP head. God!
With the newfound power of this fallen at your blade, you have grown stronger, invigorated with new abilities. You now have a more powerful jumping slash attack that can hit multiple times, and has a big enough hitbox to hit enemies above and below you. You get a double jump to make platforming easier and allows you to access special areas, and finally a dash ability that makes you run much quicker to get over large gaps and past otherwise problematic enemies. You might not be able to collect many of the collectibles, but with proper maneuvering you can collect this one weapon point upgrade that I don't think was meant to be accessible. When you reach the final boss, you are more powerful than last time, and slash right up the middle in an extravagant display of power. With this strength, you surely must have banished the dark power, right? Oh, I guess not. Well, now that you've done that, you have the option to access Ultimate Mode, which lets you start with all those cool powers and still gives you the option to recruit allies. It also gives you this nifty charge attack with a huge hitbox and meaty damage. There are a few shortcuts only openable with this charge attack, so that's pretty cool. It's so much fun running through these stages with these fun abilities at lightning speed, and it adds a lot of replay value. There are a few other endings, like one where your allies come to help you in your final moments and sacrifice themselves to stop Gremory, but they aren't as interesting as the main ones I've already shown, so I'm not going to go in depth. You also unlock a boss rush mode after getting any of the endings, which is quite fun. You start with all of the characters at mid-game stats, and Zangetsu is at his normal power level. You've accessed all of the power-ups in the game from the start in this little rest area between bosses, but you can only use each one once. Side note. If you use Miriam's slide ability to slide into the teleporter instead of just walking in, you will slide through it instead of stopping in place. I just think it's neat. This makes for a fun dynamic of saving certain parts for certain bosses and trying not to waste any of them. You also have 2 health refills to use sparingly. As you may have noticed, each boss has a death rattle style attack that they will use just before they die, but none of them can actually kill you in normal gameplay. They just get you down to 1 health and look cool. But in boss rush mode, they do deal damage, so you have to master the ability to dodge them if you want to have a chance of survival. But I mean, I'm an epic gamer. I'm sure it won't be that hard for someone of my skill. See? First try. Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is an excellent game with a lot of love poured into it. It's littered with little references to classic Castlvania that any fan would enjoy. It may be annoying for some that to get some of the best content you need to replay the game several times, but I found it fun going back more skilled than before and ready to face old troubles. The game has so much character in its character moments and endings that it makes those treks back into the darkness entirely worth it. I'm happy to have gotten to experience this game, but I'm even more happy that I've been able to celebrate its 3rd anniversary. This was originally going to be a joint review of both Castlevania Curse of the Moon 1 and 2, but I just had so much to say and time flew by that I had enough for a full video with just the first game. I still plan on making a video about Curse of the Moon 2 as it is just as good, if not better, than the original. So maybe subscribe and stay for a while. I'd love to have you. And even if not, thanks for staying with me for this long and have a wonderful day. Happy birthday, Curse of the Moon.